Hi folks, welcome back to Philosophy According to Eddie. It's been a little while, but having had a conversation, I've been inspired to put another video up. See, I was talking to my sister-in-law about postmodernism, and in the conversation she sort of stopped and said, well, what actually is postmodernism? You're a philosopher. And I was like, right, okay, well I'll try and answer that. But it made me think, that's actually quite a big question and quite an important question. What is postmodernism? Because people talk about postmodernism as a movement, but actually it's quite difficult to find a fixed definition. So maybe we can have a look at this and try to understand it, try to come up with an idea. Spoiler alert, there isn't really a fixed definition. What I'm going to do though is try to give a bit of an understanding as to where postmodernism has come from, what it is, and the best that I could really summarise that into is that postmodernism is a rejection of modernism, which you're probably thinking, oh, great, okay, thanks, that's really helpful, but it really is the best definition I can give, and I'm going to explain that with reference to what modernism is and how postmodernism responds to it, while I'm tensioning my chain. So, what is modernism first? That's the first big question. Modernism comes from really the Enlightenment, so sort of the 18th century, and it's modernism as we know it comes from those Enlightenment principles that science and logic and rationalism are the way to achieve progress. And progress is seen as a linear thing. You move forward, gain more knowledge, and you progress. And it's based on, really you could boil it down to, this is removing a lot of the detail, but you could boil it down to Plato, with his idea of rational logic, rationalism through logic, and Aristotle with his idea of categorising things, everything having a purpose. So modernism is based on this idea that there is a purpose for everything, that logic and science will lead to this forward progress. There is a right way to find a purpose for everything, and that gives us forward progress. And modernism then became a big thing in the 20th century with the introduction of a lot of mass production technologies. And technology is the bit that sort of adds into those Enlightenment thoughts to really create modernism as we know it. That progress is achieved through rationalism, through working out the purposes, what we could call a classical approach. That's the term that Robert M. Pirsig uses in his book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Who'd have thought I'd like that book? And you've got this plus technology. This idea that technology will always progress, always move forward, and help us as humanity to achieve our greater purpose and to achieve progress. So it's all based on this classical idea of Plato, Aristotle, then the Enlightenment, and then add technology in, and you achieve progress. And modernism was seen to work quite a lot in the 20th century in terms of this idea of consumer capitalism, mass production, but cracks began to appear within it. One of the big problems of modernism is that it assumes that there is always forward progress and that there is one route to progress. And it is therefore what we could describe as being monolithic. A monolith is a big rock, like a big piece of rock. And so monolithic ideas are this idea that there is one way, and it kind of covers up all of the stories within a society or that go around an idea. This may sound a bit like Greek to you at this point, ironically, but think of it this way. The modern story is one of domination by the white, cisgender, straight, middle-class male. That is pretty much where the idea of modernism comes from. Educated as well. It's this academic idea of We know best, and we will lead you to progress. But this monolithic idea, this is the right way to do it, covers up all those little stories, and covers up the differences of experience for a lot of people. And so modernism kind of carried on, and I mean, we've got some great examples of modernism in stuff like, say, fast food. McDonald's is a classic example. One product throughout the world, produced at a reasonable price. People love it. That's a very modern approach. But it then covers up a lot of those individual cultures. They kind of get wiped away. So, modernism, not perfect. And these cracks were beginning to build up. And so, postmodernism came as a sort of a rejection of these modern values, and a renegotiation of modernism. As I say, I'm not going to be able to give you a perfect definition, but if you understand it as a rejection of those ideas, it'll help. So if modernism is based on the classical approach of Plato, Aristotle, and Enlightenment thinkers, postmodernism is really built on the ideas of the existentialists, and to an extent the nihilists. So we're thinking Jean-Paul Sartre, we're thinking Nietzsche. They're kind of where where the roots of postmodernism come along. Now there's loads and loads of other thinkers, and there are lots of great thinkers. I just don't have time to mention all the great postmodernist thinkers, because the whole point of postmodernism, as you'll find out, is that it is all about the fact that there isn't one single way. There isn't one single approach, and this monolithic approach, which has been put forward by the hegemonic powers. A hegemony is like a dominant power and a dominant voice in culture and society and academia. So the hegemony doesn't have all the answers, according to postmodernism, and so there's lots of people that all came off that, which is why I can't go into all of them. But it really comes from, as I say, the existentialists and the nihilists, who basically said there is no set purpose, there is no plan, there is no meaning, except for the meaning that you make for yourself. And this has kind of filtered down as a rejection of the idea that modernism knows the best thing for everyone, because modernism doesn't have all the answers. Modernism overlooks the views of the non-white, the non-middle class, the non-academic, the non-straight, the non-cisgender. So, enter postmodernism. The idea that you don't have one strict way, but everything is relative. Everything is always changing. Everything is in flux. There isn't one single purpose. There are many different purposes depending on the situation, depending on the people. There isn't one route to progress. There are many different routes depending on situations. There isn't one right way, because what's right depends on the situation. If modernism says, do it like this, postmodernism says, it depends. It's much more fluid. It's dynamic, so it responds to the situation. It's small scale. It's for certain groups of people at certain times. It's not trying to create the one answer. It's moving with a time period. It's not saying this is true. It's saying truth and progress are social constructs. And that means that we can redefine what truth and progress mean. I'm not talking like alternative facts and all of that bullshit. I'm talking about like that different voices need to be listened to find what's true. It's not always going to be the straight white cisgender male. And so what you've got therefore is this approach that's much more responsive, much more small scale, more about finding out what's right for people at the time, and telling stories that otherwise would be covered up by modernism. Think of it like this: if McDonald's is modernism, then pop-up street food is postmodernism. It's kind of taking away the glossy veneer of modernism, and it's rethinking and reworking what modernism tries to make it do. So whereas McDonald's have got their own restaurants, everything's brightly lit and plastic fantastic, take a street food place that sets up in a shipping container. You know, shipping container, the perfect example of like modern consumer capitalism moving big bulk goods around the world, but instead someone's taken it and they've made a small-scale restaurant in there, and that might only last for weeks, months, but that's okay, because then it'll change, it'll develop into something else, someone else will come along. That's postmodern. It doesn't have to be a big chain who knows what's right. It's meeting the needs of the people at the time. It's kind of ironic that I'm trying to define postmodernism in that sense, because the whole point of postmodernism is rejecting this idea that there's the one single truth. But hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea about what the postmodern approach is. It's sort of saying, pull away the sheet, pull away that kind of modern gloss. I've given you, hopefully, a bit of an idea as to what modernism is, and that means that when I say that postmodernism is the rejection of modernism, that'll make a bit more sense. Now, maybe the time will come when postmodernism is rejected as an approach. It isn't perfect, but in terms of the two together and that dichotomy, hopefully this video gives you enough of an idea of how these link together. So, if you've got any questions or comments, leave them below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you next time.